All right. Real happy to have the next gentleman on the Sports Card Nation guest line. We were just joking around off the air. It's been an interview long in the making, but glad he's a busy gentleman. Glad to finally get him on and generous to make some time for us as well. So, without further ado, I'm glad to welcome Mike Baker of MBA, Mike Baker Authentication. Mike, welcome.
Thanks for having me, John. Good to be here. Finally.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. Listen, like when we obviously grading is a button topic in the hobby in the industry, and when you take a grade, and I'm not fluffing you up, I'm just being honest, right? You're one of the names that come to mind because of your experience in that niche and still doing it in your own way as well. Now, am I correct? Did I read that you were the first employee of PSA or first grader?
Yes, both. First employee. Actually, it's 35 years this month that PSA started. So dating myself there, but can't get past the father time and the facts. So
Yeah, I'm with you. Talk about like a little bit before that. Like, how did that even start? You just applied? Did you get recruited? Like, how did your career at PSA start?
it's basically just being at the right place at the right time. I had already been with the sister company, Professional Coin Grading Service, PCGS, for 2 years prior to PSA's inception. And just by being there while they were developing the processes and everything else, I'm just like, wow, this is where I want to go. And so I just kind of made myself available for any conversation that I could find myself to be in, to get into the conversation of who might be the guy to take it over, or basically be the first guy there. And by de facto, I made myself that guy with their approval, of course.
So you're the answer to that trivia question, which is pretty cool. You were there a decade plus. I mean,
Yep.
when you think back into like grading in its infancy, if you will, and where we are today here in 2026, I mean, it's kind of a loaded question, but like, what's the like? How has it changed in your opinion through the decades?
Well, when PSA first started, there was no half point system. So right there, working with a high end seven, a low end eight type thing it was difficult to kind of have the delineation that you have today with the half points. So, and that moved on. It was, I think, for 14 and plus years, they didn't have it. So they didn't change until the early 2000s. So that change was a big one that we didn't have. I didn't have. The change with the internet, eBay coming on in '98, that was a major one. QVC and doing big bulk submissions for modern stuff to try to narrow the gap in the brand awareness of what PSA was representing, what they were actually doing. That helped big time. So there was a lot of things that kind of coalesced. You had the '98 home run derby with McGuire and Bonds. So there's a couple little things that really helped juice up the, no pun intended, the entire entire market as a whole. So those were some of the transformative things that I saw happen at that time. And you can look back now and say, what were really the kind of the markers that kind of really pushed things over the edge. Dealer support at the beginning of PSA's inception, there was very little dealer support. There's a lot of collector support that kind of made the dealers kind of, I'll buy that car from you for this price if you get it graded by PSA. And then we had PSA authorized dealers, and things kind of went a much better direction in terms of brand awareness and submissions and all those good things.
I'll pick your brain here, Mike. A lot of people complain. Obviously, most people know what's going on now. A lot of backlog, especially at PSA. They've paused their lower levels. Some people are complaining that people are sending in, air quotes, lesser cards that maybe shouldn't be graded, or why are you grading that? It's a $5 base card. Again, it's the individual's card. If they want to grade, might have a sentimental reason, right? There's all sorts of reasons. But I've heard people, it's been called like the junk slab error. I mean, someone who's been in it that long. Was this always the case? And maybe we're just more noticeable now because there's more people sending cards, or is this sort of a new phenomenon? How do you see it as someone that was there on in the early trenches to where we are today?
Well, in the early days, just to get people to carry the product and start this kind of transactionality, so you got consistent with what people were buying and selling, and it just because forever it's been a raw product, and now it's encapsulated, and now there's more trust when you send an encapsulated product across the, across state lines, whatever it was. There's all this kind of bugaboos and whatever that came with it. What really has transformed it, in my opinion, is repacking. And, when you just brought up, a $5 card to get graded, well, the repackers need that $5 to get graded so that they can put that in the product. And so that's really what is, in my opinion, has been the kind of major driver for cards. I will say, though, because the brand awareness is so big, people will come up to shows and, at my booth, I can speak for what we're getting, and they just want it encapsulated, and they're willing to pay the price. I mean, there's stories, and you could get a lot of dealers on here. They remember the early days with PSA when $6 bulk deals and, basically getting cards graded for under $10 without any uptick charges. That was the norm. And now, it's just a different era. 35 years later ish, that's, who knew that repackers are going to be such a big deal, and digital repacks, physical, it's just gone places where the market's humming. I never thought having a conversation where a grading company, the biggest grading company in the business, PSA, would have to shut down because they're getting too many cards, and then to boot have a 8-figure backlog. That's crazy, and yeah, things have changed.
Yeah, and great point by you too, Mike. I that kind of slipped through my 5-0 with the repackers role in this as well. I didn't forget about them, but you don't, you forget the impact they're having because they need those graded cards, whether it's like you said, digital, opening a digital pack, there's got to be a real card behind that, that person has the option to either take possession or have them hold in whatever their holding facility vault. But I think sometimes a lot of us probably don't even realize that impact of it. It's not just, Joe Smith from Sheboygan. And again, it's not really, when people complain about that to me, even at my tables, I'm like, listen, if people want to pay the grading fee to have a card graded, that's their prerogative. This is America, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like you can get mad, but when we think of the grading niche too, Mike, like it's a weird business model because like if a restaurant is really too busy, they just hire more staff, maybe build an addition with more seating, but grading's different because obviously you don't want just any, you say, well, just hire more graders, right? That's easily said, right? But you want to, they need to be put through the paces, apprentice, be trained, and I think anyone that's getting their cards graded don't want just anyone to do it. If you have a choice between someone who's experienced, who knows what they're doing or doesn't, I think the choice is easy. So, I know grading gets compared to a lot of, normal businesses, if you will. And I think it's sometimes hard to do that because it's just such a different kind of industry. It's not a restaurant where you can train a wait staff or, even a cook or whatnot in a week's time, maybe, or less. Right. It's not as easy as that. So, I mean, kind of your thoughts on that.
Well, you just nailed it. I mean, this is, grading isn't 3 letters. It's graders, human beings are doing this. And, I'll give AI and machine learning a little bit of props to help with the centering identification and sizing identification. But ultimately, it's the guy that's looking at the card, and then having his experience on what he's looking at and interpreting that to a standard and then applying that consistently. It's not something you just grab off the street. If it was that easy, we wouldn't have 10 million card backlogs. Do you think PSA or any other grading service wants to shut down their business and not take revenue? I mean, you can conspiratorial think, oh, they're just trying to drive prices so they get more money for higher charge services. No one's, in my opinion, I don't believe that. I think, there are cards that, like you said, they're worth $5, and, there's a service option to service those types of cards valued at that level. But if any grading service can, get 10 million cards out, they would try to do that. And I think, like you said, it's gated by the person's experience. You can't take them off the street. They have to go through the litmus test, so to speak, to get into the chair, know what you're doing, and then, effectively grade, and it's a talent. It really is.
Do you think this will be more the norm? Like, even when, in PSA's case, they unpause these lower levels, these bulk levels. Do you think this is going to be sort of like we're going to see this every so often, or do you think there'll ever be a point where they can stay ahead of it, or not really, just because of the growth of the hobby?
Well, that's the balance, right? It's how much growth are we talking about? What's the future look like? I think after COVID, I would have thought that wouldn't happen again. But the market's it's dynamic. It's going to do what it's going to do. And I will say, like any market, there will be ups, and there's hyperbolic ups right now within the market, and there will be a downturn at some point. It's just how it goes. It's Murphy's law, whatever law you want to apply to what goes up must come down type thing. I think it's, to what degree does it continue to go up, and to what degree, when it does correct, will it go down? And I think that's the kind of the debate of, where should you be, the timing of the market, just like stocks or real estate. You hold something for a while, you really like it, especially, trading cards in particular. We all have a passion for them. And, I always say, if your house is on fire and you've got cards, your dog, and your wife, what order are you grabbing? Which one? It's cards usually falls on top, and
I'm not going to answer that. Just to stay married.
We're all we all have a lot of OCD behavior in us. To what degree is debatable, but when you're spending your discretionary income on things like this, and now it's not even a baseball card anymore. Now it's an alternate class asset and all these other, big league terms, so to speak, and they're coming in. I'd like to believe that's going to continue to roar. I know it feels like the market's cool. It's got a wow factor now. It before was like, oh, I got back from college and my mom threw away everything that I had in the attic and stuff. Or those are just baseball cards. Who really cares about that? And now it's like, what do you mean you have Pokemon cards and, trading cards? Look, that's the greatest thing ever. You could be sitting on a fortune. So the whole narrative is switched. So to what degree that holds the line in terms of it going forward on a 4 or 5X or whatever X you want to apply, I don't know. But I want to put my finger on it and say, I think it's got some shelf life left to go still. So.
Yeah, no doubt. I tend to lean towards what you're saying. I think it's going to get bigger. How much? I guess the question is how much bigger, right? Not the if. It's just how, the quantity of. I got to ask you this question, Mike. We've Collectors Universe, the parent company of PSA. Obviously, they acquired SGC a few years back. We then read more recently they've acquired Beckett Grading as well. A lot of people up in arms saying it's a monopoly. They own 3 of what most people would agree is the big 4. People want the government or the Federal Trade Commission to look into it, get involved. As someone who's worked for PSA and now has his own grading company, in a sense, like, kind of where do you fall on, what people are thinking here with the monopoly word and antitrust and all that stuff that comes with it?
Politically speaking, it's easy. For me, from MBA's perspective, my personal perspective, it's great because we're an independent. And if you're tired of not wanting to deal with what is perceived as a monopoly or whatever the perception is, then there's options. There's CGC, there's TAG, there's others that are out there that are trying their hardest to win the hearts and minds of the community at large and whatnot. And I know we're doing the best that we can. Ultimately, it's going to be dependent upon, how they conduct the overall operations. They say they're independent. I've been in interviews in the past where I've commented on, there's something good that could come from this by consolidating. I know that's kind of like the opposite world of what most people on the street would agree with, but if it's done right, they could pull it. If it's not, it'll go, the market will dictate what's going to happen. And if that means oversight or whatever may come from it or not, I don't know. All I can tell you is, nobody wants to have a 10 million card backlog and not be able to get those out and tell people that have submitted that their cards aren't coming back until next year. That I can tell you. So I know no one's sitting around going, how much longer can we hold on to these cards before we send them out without them getting pissed off? I don't believe anyone's thinking that way. I think everyone's trying to do their best, get the cards in and out. And then it just comes down to service and, are you staying consistent to the line? I think those are the two things that people mostly should be concerned with or considerate of, is service and consistency. That's where it sits. That's what's going to win out.
Yeah. One more question kind of pertaining to those groups, I'm asking you to put your fortune teller hat on, looking into the future. 5 years from now, does Collectors Universe or Collectives Holding, do they still own all three grading companies? Do they own?
Oof.
Do they sell one, two?
That's a good question.
You're not going to be penalized for being wrong?
I think they're going to be public, and I think they're probably going to have all three and or more divisions under their umbrella. So within 5 years, they're public. They're a big juggernaut. They're moving and shaking. They're escalating the 10x factor. I know Michael Rubin said that's what he would like to accomplish at Fanatics. And, who knows? He said that a few years ago. And they just got the licenses this year. So, that 10x factor could be there might be another multiplier on top of that. So PSA just opened an office in Frankfurt, Germany. We're talking about opening up internationally at some point in the future. Right now, we're trying to get our system scaled up to handle what we get right now. But the international thing, it just shows you the growth of the hobby overall. We're going to attend the Macau show in October. So we're going to Macau, China, to go talk to collectors. We get a lot of interest from, Singapore and Taiwan and far. It's unbelievable how much reach now is out there and how people are collecting and transacting all around the world right now. And that's really the unknown factor. And how long does that heat up and continue to churn, Yeah,
it's a, it used to be kind of America's hobby, right? And now it's a worldwide phenomenon. And we're seeing shows like you just said in China, in Germany, and other countries that have never had card shows, in London, and the list goes on and on. And I like to see that. I'm as someone who started in 1979 as a 7-year-old kid, I like the fact that I don't want to think that someone can't enjoy the hobby because of where they live, right? And that's a disqualifier. So I enjoy seeing the growth, if it's good growth, right? There's that's a double-edged sword. We won't go down that rabbit hole, but I do enjoy seeing the growth. But it's interesting to hear you say, in your opinion, you think they still, not only do you think they still hold those companies, and you've even mentioned maybe even acquire another one. That would surprise me with some of the, to answer my own question, Mike, I don't know if they're already getting heat for what they own now to add another one, whoever that may be. I'd be surprised if they did that, but nothing really should surprise us anymore. What we've seen in the last decade in the hobby.
Well, you keep pushing until you find out where you can't push anymore, right?
Yeah.
So if they were to do something like that, and someone said no, okay, well, we know the oven's hot now, we won't touch it. So, but if someone says the oven is open for business, then why not?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. And listen, I do that, when I still play men's competitive softball, and I coached varsity high school baseball and football. And I would put, I push the umps or the refs right until they tell me none, I don't want to hear another word out of you. You're gone. And I know that, all right, I gotta keep my mouth quiet now. So it makes sense. So yeah, maybe that's what it'll be, right? Where until they're told, hey, you have to sell at least one or more, you can't do that. But Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. My big fear, and I'll just like close this segment with my big fear. People ask me because I was bulk subbing as an SGC bulk subber at the time of the acquisition. And a lot of people were asking me, "Hey, what does this mean? What is this going to look like?" And honestly, I can only give an opinion. I'm not in those meetings or those outlook plans, so I gave my opinion. But one thing I was glad about, my big fear, and I'll get your take on this too, Mike. My big fear was that Fanatics was going to buy a grading card company, and I don't want to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it's a conflict of interest when you're
Mm-hmm.
producing cards and grading them, and not only grading your own cards per se, but you're also, in a sense, will be cards for all reports very well. And I don't think they need a grading card company. As someone who's again very experienced in the grades, let's say acquired SGC or even someone else and got into the grading space.
You broke up there a little bit, John. So I'll just grab what I could make out of the stuff with the internet connection. I don't know what happened there, but give me a quick snapshot of what you were talking about. Fanatics owning a grading company.
Yeah, I'm at like, yeah, I'm glad Fanatics didn't. And again, everything can still happen, but at this point, Fanatics, there was rumors they tried to acquire
Mhm.
SGC and others
Mhm.
grading companies. I don't want to see Fanatics own a grading company. I just
Mhm.
think it's a
Yeah.
conflict of interest
Yep.
with grading their own cards, grading competitors' cards. I think it just sets it's a bad sort of precedent.
Mhm.
As someone again of your expertise
Yeah.
in the space,
Yep.
do you agree, disagree? Something you're glad it's not the case now?
Well,
Where do you fall there?
uh, ideally, there would be guardrails up for companies that have access to production, sales, and everything else. But in this market over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen what you mentioned about PSA doing or collectors, other things that have kind of gone on that I would have thought years ago would have absolutely not happened, and now they are. And there's an uproar, but it seems like our news cycle the velocity is so fast that there's no like traction of something. It just like everyone kind of gets up in arms about it, whatever it may be, and then it kind of burns its shelf life off in 48 hours to a week, and then it's on to the next butterfly to catch. And so however it works out with Fanatics doing anything or whatever other company, it'll be what it'll be. And the people, again, the market's going to go back and decide what they want to do business with or not. I mean, ultimately, if the prevailing thought is that Fanatics shouldn't do that, then the only way to counter it, if they were to do it, is for people to not do business with them, to make it so they get. But ultimately, there's ways to gamify everything and kind of make the friction not be so frictional or whatever the word is to use them as a service hypothetically. So I don't know. We could go on and on about the debate of the what ifs and stuff. They're going to do what they're going to do, and PSA did what they were going to do, and they left it like, hey, we did it. Now what? And everyone's still submitting to the point where they had to shut down services. So, if it was that big of a deal, I think you would notice it more in submissions because, even if you can't stand whatever you hate about a service or the service, ultimately the three letters command a lot of liquidity, and people are entrenched
Yeah.
in certain brands for that liquidity. And some of them, are so OCD they can't fathom using another grading service to kind of mess up their ecosystem within their collectibles. So they want all the same holders. They want everything to look this way. Everything's got to be this color or that color. So, I don't know. I think it's up for each individual to figure out, look, if you have $100 bill right now and you could spend it on anything, why this market? Why that grading service? Why whatever, right? So ultimately, it's going to be up to you and the other people in the world to sort where they want to spend their money. And for whatever reason, even if it's putting your nose up in the air, saying, I hate to do this, but I have to. My client will only buy it if it's in this grading services holder. You're going to look the other way. Most people do. Conviction in our world, in the business world, you can't put your personal opinion. You have to do business, and business is business. It's cliche for a reason.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. All right, let's enough talking about other three letters. Let's talk about MBA. Right, we gave them some free pub. Not that they need it, but we gave it to them anyway. Let's talk about your company, MBA, Mike Baker Authentication. Kind of like, how why you started it, how you started it, where you are today, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. The why was there's a need, just heard PSA celebrated, or the celebration of 150 millionth cert being bought out on the market, 35 years. So let's say the number is 150 ish with PSA overall market. You've got to probably talk in the 200 million plus range, of units of plastic that are out there over 20, 30 plus years. The grading services have changed their standards. They've included new things within their standard. They've tightened up their standard with centering. There's a lot of little here and there and everywhere where I thought a sticker could be a good idea. It was proven to be a good idea in coins with John Albanese doing the CAC sticker, much so to everyone's opinion that PCGS actually included their sticker into their weighting of the PCGS coin registry. So it included a lot more gamification. So a sticker had a higher weight, or has a higher weight than a non-stickered coin. So it has a track record of highlighting better copies within the grade. So I did not invent that wheel. PWCC was doing their sticker well before MBA came up with one for the trading card industry. There are other stickers that auction houses use. Four Shop Corners has theirs. Heritage has one. There's been others here and there. That was the need. The need is, you've got all these great cards out there that are in the same grade, but some cards are just better within the grade. I always use this example for nines in particular. PSA doesn't have a 9.5. So between a 9.0 and a 9.9, there's just better cards. It's just a fact. They don't have a pristine, they don't have a flawless or a black label type thing. So our sticker helps with that. And overall, we'll be celebrating our 6-year anniversary coming up here in August. And we finally got some really great, I think we hit our moment in time, our tipping point last national in Chicago. And some great sales happened. Heritage got some great sales. Golden got some great sales. REA, Fanatics. And it just was this perfect moment where they started advertising MBA within the catalog, that, describing it properly. There's more search. There's just more information. Also, when we first started, a lot of the cards that we sticker were in personal collections, so it was no one wants to sell PC cards, right? But this hyperbolic market has drawn out a lot of colorful cards that are stickered, great cards, and they're selling for stratospheric prices, and it just keeps churning. So another log gets thrown on the fire, and it's still roaring and ripping, and it's been great. It's been a hard road, but getting out there, COVID was a big non-starter for people wanting to send their cards. We've been labeled grading the graders and all the other, fun terms and whatnot. Ultimately, it's a crossover service. The sticker means something to what we do for our MBA graded product. So if it's a silver sticker, it's going to get the exact same grade, but you're going to get a silver sticker on our holder because it's denoting superior eye appeal for that card in that grade. A gold sticker represents something that's a half point or higher.
Yeah, I'm a little stubborn. I'm a little old. And so I always felt it was like you're paying twice to have one card graded. So I've never done it. Again, it's a free country. It's America, right? And obviously enough people want it done. I guess my question to you is not so much why, but when a card gets a silver stick, and it was a great point by you, right? With CAC, I know they were called the green bean in the coin. And the track record shows us, right? I'm not a coin guy, but I did enough research to know, and I have a coin guy friend who said, "Hey, John, when with that green bean sticker, those coins bring more money on the second, like it or not, those bring more money on the secondary market, right? So I guess my question to you is between the silver and the gold, and like I've heard it worded like this is bet, in the 10% of the top of that grade. How do you know that? I guess would be I know it's sort of a simple, maybe too simplified, but how do you know that it is, other than you feel like it's sort of like, I mean, grading is subjective to begin with. You know what I mean? To say that, how do we know?
Well, I think, if I showed you 10 copies, I think it would be pretty easy for you and I to agree that the copy that's getting a sticker is within the percentage that's being, marketed. Ultimately, though, we started our graded product holder hit the market in January of 25. Now, it shifted from it being that conversation of, if you had 10 or 15 cards in front of you, which ones would you, what could we all agree that is the superior copy within that grade in that sample? And now it's literally a crossover. So, we look at it like it's got to adhere to MBA standards, MBA grading standards, and the sticker goes to that. If there's ever, a wobbler, then maybe the conversation can kick into the 10%, but by the national or shortly thereafter, we'll have our bronze sticker that's going to come out, and that's going to be the grade equivalent. So it's basically going to note, bronze sticker will denote the exact same grade going into an MBA holder. A silver will denote superior eye appeal for that grade. So you'd have a silver, gold, half point or higher, and black strictly for 10s for denoting a flawless example. So that's how you know.
Yeah. I hear black label, and yet that makes me think about the whole Beckett controversy. That's a whole show in itself. But that's them and not you. So, what, for those that are listening, like, what's the difference between this? So is there going to be no more gold? Is there a gold label?
Yeah, they're all So basically, third party graded cards, PSA, SGC, BGS, CGC, tag are the ones that we do right now. Any gold represents a higher grade. Any silver represents the same grade with superior eye appeal. And when we do launch bronze, it will reflect the exact same grade going into an MBA graded holder.
Yeah. So if a card gets a gold sticker from MBA, you're basically saying it was undergraded.
That's right.
In your opinion.
Yes.
Do you ever, not that you care, do you ever get any pushback or feedback from a grading card company that, like, hey, why do you do that? Or you're wrong, or that doesn't make sense?
No, there's not. I think it's, I joked about it last week, and it's kind of like Anchorman. The grading services are kind of like news stations, and it seems like there's not a lot of, cohesion. Now, I know, Scott at SGC, great guy, knows his stuff, no doubt about it. Can I call him up and ask him about a card's nuances, or if there's a question about something? Absolutely. Are we having, a philosophical discussion about what MBA is doing relative to a sticker? No. And I bet if we did, he'd think it'd be great. Same with some of the guys that I hired and trained that are still at PSA, leading the entire grading department. I think they say that they're great. They're happy that I found a lane to, that I'm happy with. And I think the market, for the most part, has been acceptant of. I know there's the naysayers out there, but like you said about the coin, the CAC, the green bean sticker, whether you like me or you don't like me, it's not a personality thing. It's the data that comes from the sales, and that builds the business case. And that's where the decision should lie from, not on all the other superfluous stuff that you can get caught up in this, cause and effect mentality that a lot of people have in our hobby.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. You mentioned PWCC. They had some of their awards when they were around and existed. And I think sometimes anyone that does any kind of affiliation or aligns themselves with them will take some of that heat, whether it's justifiable or unjustifiable. I mean, talk to you, they don't exist anymore in their original form as they, talk about as much as you can, like, did it affect your brand? I know sometimes you're mentioned when someone is speaking ill of
Mhm.
PWTC.
Mhm.
Sometimes they'll throw your name into the same hat, whether that's,
Yeah.
right or wrong. Just talk about some of that, that happens there.
You know, overall, I can tell you that I was telling you before we got on, we went live, the shows, I go to like 2 to 3 shows every month. I travel all across the country. Um, I'm literally, I believe I'm the only grader that's stepping outside of a booth to talk to customers about whatever they want to talk about. So I'm not on message boards. I'm not, battling at 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody that has a different opinion than I do. I don't do that, but I'm happy to have a healthy discussion about whatever is going on in the hobby, good, bad, and different. I told you I'm an open book before we got on, and I am. I'll answer tough questions and take tough, whatever it may be. I don't dodge. Regarding PWCC, no. I mean, or any other service for that matter. We're going to do what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do, and anyone else can do whatever they want to do, and ultimately, I'll be judged by how we conduct ourselves and how we go forward. And when you're disrupting things, when you're grading the graders or you're auditing a grading company or whatever the words are to describe what we're doing, and really what we're doing is it's a crossover service. PSA, Beckett, SGC all provide a crossover service where they're grading their competitors to see if that card can then be turned into or crossed over into their product. That's all that we're doing with that. So it's not much more. There's no like smoke anywhere other than the simple fact that that's what we are doing. So, and I hope we continue to do more of it, and I'll continue to go out and keep charging down the line to, get our brand awareness out there as much as all the other companies have been with a much larger track record and time in, basically. So,
Well, I appreciate you being candid, and like you said, I never even thought about it until like you said, we talked before we hit record, right? Is whatever the other three grading company, the ones you see in the front are not the graders, or not, you know what I mean? They're representatives of the company, and you're behind your table, right? That's your name.
my
That's
name's on it.
your name on the company, right? And you're, like you
Yeah.
said, you're not hiding, you're
Nope.
not behind the curtain, and so that's refreshing, and I definitely appreciate that about you, and I'm sure others do as well. And again, like you said, you'll answer whatever question someone may have. I just hope, like I try to do, people, ask them tactfully and respectfully rather than be, a Yahoo about
Accusatory.
it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
It, it,
uh,
it, like we were talking earlier too, people coming up, they're all respectful. I don't have a back and forth or, hey, let's go outside and finish this discussion.
yeah,
I don't have, that never gets to that. So, I think if given a couple of minutes or whatever time frame, as long as I answer the question and they can see my eyes, see my body language, and know that
yeah,
I'm trying to be as transparent as I possibly can be and be honest about it. In this market too, there's so much misconception, and news today can be not the news tomorrow. And so I always try to just be consistent with who you are. That's another cliche, but it does matter. So
yeah. No, no, it's well said. All right, Mike, I got to ask your opinion, right? Counterfeit cards, altering, cleaning,
mhm,
adding color. I'm sure I
mhm,
left something out. That's
mhm.
not a new thing. That's been around for years. Um, but do you think we're seeing more of that?
Well, it's hard to, maybe because we have more information about it. We have more of it because there's just more cards being submitted. When you see some of the metrics that PSA has put out, their counterfeits went up whatever percent. It's because they're getting more of them, or there's just more volume coming in, and people just don't know. Or if they do know, they're trying to get it past you or past the grading service. So, by de facto, you would expect if you're doing 10,000 cards, 20 years ago, and you're doing 2 million cards 20 years later, that there's going to be, I don't know if it's a higher percentage per se, or is it just, it's kind of rolls with the numbers. Not everybody has a 1986 Michael Jordan Fleer that's counterfeit to pump the numbers up. I'm sure most people would want an authentic one. I guess the real question is, within this market that has become so hyperbolic and international, are there bad actors out there, creating things and doing things to really, kind of go within the 2 million card submission or whatever the submissions are for any grading service that's out there? Are they trying to filter some of those in? I'd probably say yes. Now, to what degree is the debate? And that's based on what the grading services are seeing in their metrics, based on how many they've caught, how many are in holders, how many they kicked as, as trimmed or recolored or whatever. And those data points, I'm sure, are definitely available internally. I don't know what they are externally per se, but I can tell you that recoloring seems to be a big one with Pokemon, both in coloring pencil and in pen, to hide some of the chipping on the back, whether it's blue or the gold. So that's definitely a big. And if you again look at the numbers based on what PSA is receiving, if they're doing over 1.5 million TCG Pokemon cards, and it's like 500,000-600,000 sports cards, then the numbers for those types of cards are probably pretty high, in terms of, trying to, improve the card's condition by coloring the card. The other ones, I don't know. We don't get a lot of, fake 86 Jordans. It's like, when you have a computer virus, you're going to get a lot more on a Mac, or excuse me, a lot more on a Windows operating system, because more people have Windows than Mac. So, I mean, that just kind of goes with the territory. So,
yeah, we've seen grading card companies get criticized. PSA, really all of them, right? Yourself included. I've seen like, hey, they slabbed or they stickered this, and it turned out to be, fake or altered. How can that happen? I mean, how do you I'll ask you sort of a two-pronged question, right? How does that happen? And are these people who are doing these bad things, and are they getting better? It's illegal, but are they getting better at their illegal craft through the year? Is it getting harder to detect this stuff than it was 10 or 20 years ago?
So some of the Pokemon and TCG cards are definitely challenging to detect. They're coming, I mean, it's some of them look really good, no doubt about it. And it's mainly ultra modern. Counterfeiting a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle, no, because you can't recreate the paper stock. I haven't seen that done ever. T206 Honus Wagner, nope, haven't seen one of them come close to being original. So, and I don't think you would find, or unless it was just a glaring error, any grading service with their salt would have holdered or have holdered anything in the vintage era, sports primarily, in the counterfeiting world or whatever. Alteration, trimming, and whatnot has always been kind of the thing, or something that anyone could do. It doesn't take a 3D printer to make a new card type thing. You need a cutter or whatever instrument is being used to improve the edge or corners of a card. And, mainly they leave, traditionally they leave signatures to the cut, striations on the edge, and people will use old cutting blades to mirror what it looks like. They'll age the card by adding, to dirt it up basically so I always call it like, when you remove bark from a tree, you see the new underlinements of the tree. Much like paper, if you cut something that's been oxidized and exposed to air and, wear or use, it looks dirty. It looks time period, so to speak. And if you cut it, it's going to show a whiter or cleaner edge, and people will try to hide that and doctor it up to, fool the graders and whatnot. So, it's a challenge, but there's no grading service that wants to hold their cards that have been trimmed or counterfeit. You're not going to have a long shelf life. That's just a fact. So, no, I think everyone's doing what they can. We're doing everything we can on our end, relative to using machine learning to help us with size, to help be more consistent with centering. Even though we can grab a loop lens and mic it out to micrometers and get the exact stuff on the left to right or the top to bottom, it's nice to have what the learning system is telling us its opinion is, and then we marry it up. It's like having a second automated grader with you. So it's an assistant really to help and honestly help speed up, because if you're taking time to loop every card in terms of identifying centering, it takes time. and to have something that's close to it, and then you can verify it if needed, then, there's that sizing, immediately whether or not the card is 2.5 by 3.5 from 1957 to present, and you can, evaluate the card and go forward from that. Ultimately, it's going to be what your experience is in looking at those cards, though. You can have a card that measures exactly to factory specs, and it still could be altered and or trimmed. And that's going to be up to you and how much experience you have with that issue to determine that. And not only call it once, you get scared and you don't grade it, and then it comes back and it's seen again a couple months later or whatever it may be, and you grade it. So there's the built-in inconsistency. So really, you have to grade what you see. You can't take, if you have to articulate what you see. So if in fact you're going to call something that cannot be holdered for whatever reason, you got to be able to articulate that. It'll resonate more with the grading process, and that makes you more consistent as a grading service. And I think you or the submitters at large, once you start seeing what the grading services are calling it that way, you can hopefully get more educated about what we're seeing, how we're seeing it, and then you can be a stopgap or a filter before those cards ever come to a grader's desk.
Yeah, it's funny. I almost feel like it's a chess match, right? Between grading companies and graders and the people doing, the bad things, trimming, altering, making just a fake card. And it's like you got to just stay one step ahead of them as they improve what they do. It's like cat and mouse, right? And it's
Yes.
it reminds me like the FBI. Like the FBI will sometimes hire like former, burglars and crooks to pick their brain to like, hey, what are we looking for, or how do we stop this, and that sort of thing. Or especially with like hackers and computer, they'll hire those folks and pay them and make them use their craft for good rather than the other side. And it just sort of reminds me of that. And it's funny you mentioned, because there's a lot of times, when I'm thinking about what I do with the SGC bulk service, obviously I'm handling those cards at my table as they're being subbed, and I'll see a Jordan rookie and I'll know like, hey, I have to be the bearer of bad news. Like I'm 99% sure, this is not legit. Where did you get, what's the provenance? Where did you get it? And, and sometimes someone will say, well, thank you. That's what I thought. You kind of confirmed it. Other times people will say, John, like, I believe you. And I think so too. Can we just, I'll pay for it. I'll send it. I got to know for sure. And I'm like, just be prepared. It's probably going to be that, but we'll let them make that determination. And you mentioned Pokemon. I'm not a Pokemon guy, but obviously I get those cards through that bulk submission, and per capita, I'll use that qualifier. I get more Pokemon cards back ungraded for, like you said, either altering or just being plain out a fake, comparably speaking to the sports counterparts. I guess, why do you think that is? Is it just maybe easier? Is it just because it's blowing up right now? People will tell you like right now, Pokemon's even hotter than the sports card market. Is it as simple as that, or why does it seem like we're seeing more, fake and altering on the Pokemon side? It seems that way. And
you just you just checked all the boxes in terms of why. It's the number one submitted card right now by a factor of like 2.5 times to its sports, contemporary. It's all made now, so it's all modern. So if you had a print shop that was legit, and you could go to places that will do it for you in the Far East, you could get away with a lot of stuff, especially because there's a lot of people collect that raw. And in our market, as you know, if you get something that's cheaper than it usually goes, you think you got a deal. And so it's like your natural reaction to not think that there's something wrong with the card and celebrate the fact that you got it for cheaper than what it actually goes for. And you kind of rationalize that in your mind that you got a deal, and you're not even thinking about whether it's authentic or not. At least the collectors, the dealers have more awareness on what they should look for. There's enough information out there There's some great, I've said this in interviews in the past, there's some guys that really know their stuff, and they're happy to publish it on YouTube and Instagram and all that stuff, talk about what they're seeing, like subgroups of guys that are really like into basketball, inserts or Pokemon vintage or whatever. And, those guys are some of the best detectives out there too. And I'd be an idiot not to listen to what they're seeing trend wise and everything else. I think the grading service as a whole, if they're smart, they're looking at these specialists and these different little nooks and crannies of the hobby and see what they have, and kind of use them as a hub for trends that are happening. What are you seeing? How does it work? You've seen some of the videos where you can take some of these Pokemon cards and literally take the top part of it, and it just pulls right off like a sticker. It literally is a sticker. It's not even a card. Well, it's a sticker card basically, but the way it's produced is so, not the way it was produced from the factory. And as you can see, it's, in its kind of infancy. I think they're going to get better, honestly, in terms of what's coming in Pokemon in particular. But I think if we all kind of work together, and the grading service is where the buck stops with whatever grading service you have and what their experience is and what they're going to put in a holder, et cetera, et cetera. So just what's the approach to make sure that you have guardrails up to do as much as you can to ensure that cards that shouldn't be in a holder don't end up in a holder?
Yeah, no doubt. And I agree. I guess, with I don't do Pokemon, but I've seen just a lot more come back counterfeit. I'm more apt to catch at my table, Mike. I'm more apt to catch a sports card. That's my lane.
Yep.
I've caught them before. And again, some people will still say, well, can I still send it? For my own peace of mind, I want them to sort of give it a thumbs up or thumbs down, and sometimes that happens. What do you say when someone says, I get this all the time, like someone doesn't like the grade they get, and they'll say, well, the grader might have gotten an argument with his wife that morning, or and brought it to work. I mean, do you buy that, or do you think that's just sour grapes?
Well, I mean, that's exactly my point with cause and effect. I got a bad card. I think if the grading services were more transparent about why the card graded the way it did, it would be much more, helpful in having those type of conspiratorial theories, diminish basically. Because, for MBA, every card that we do, or whether it's a graded card or a card that receives a sticker, you get a heat map from us, which tells you exactly where we have the issue with the card. We don't, dissect the whole card and give you every single problem, but mainly the main concern with the card. And, is the upper left corner, or is it, a surface scratch or something, just to kind of help you kind of get some more information than what's currently available. That helps. As far as a guy having a bad night with his lady, or, I'm sure, hey, look, we're all human beings, right?
Yeah.
If you're pissed off, you're not happy with whatever's going on in your life, I think there's a general sense that you could be more conservative, or, that kind of thing. That's not too far out of the realm, but that doesn't help the service. It doesn't help your job. I think nobody wants more customer complaints. Nobody wants that. So to do that would just be adding accelerant to something that already exists, and you don't have to do it. Just do your job. If you're a professional, I'm sure you could say, look, that guy had a bad night. I doubt it was because he got in a fight with his lady. He just had a bad night, so
it's like an athlete, right? These guys are great. They could go 0 for 4 and strike out 3 times, right?
Yep.
And the next night go 4 for 4 with 2 home runs and
that's right,
and 6 RBIs. Like
yep.
I get it. I like the fact that you said like you heat map it, because one of the questions I get back when grading's done and I'm returning the cards and someone that maybe doesn't like the grade, or like, hey, what caused this 8, let's say, and there's really no explanation. And they'll, John, look at this card. What do you see? Like, can you see it? Like, and I'm like, well, look at it under, magnification too. Like sometimes you can't always see things just with the naked eye. So I always say, and that's even before sending the grading, Mike, not after the fact. But it's nice that you kind of you're letting the subber know, like, here's why this got this grade. So that sort of takes that guessing game out that I have to play sometimes
Yeah.
with some of my subbers, where they're like, John, what do you see here? Like, I don't see it. Like, I don't
Right.
get it. Like, this
Yeah.
should have, and it puts me in a weird spot. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not like, it's not I shy away from, but I'm like, I don't know. There's something like, and I always have at my table, I always have like one of these. I actually have one right here, but I have one at my show table, like just a
Uh-huh.
magnification, right? Look, any tool you can use beforehand that maybe, that was one of the early mistakes I made when I was grading my cards back in the, 20 years ago, is I gave myself too many passes. Like, I'd see something, be like, it's minor, no big deal, you know and you learn by trial and error. Like,
Yep.
they're doing their job. It's not a no big deal to them. You're
Right.
giving yourself a free pass, but that's not what they're going to do or should do, right?
Right.
And I learned to, and I think sometimes we're all guilty of that, right? When we critique ourselves, sometimes we'll be a little easier on ourselves than maybe someone else would. I just think, like you said, it's human nature and that sort of thing. Uh, One last question before we kind of I've had this debate with sometimes people, whether it be on the podcast or even at a show. There's people that say, John, in the art world, right? They bring pictures back. They recondition them. They'll fix them so they're as close to like original form, and it's not viewed as altering. They're still up in museums. They're still protected with security systems. Like, I don't think adding a little color to a card or rolling a crease out, if it keeps the same size, if that's possible. Um, I just think that's kind of what the art world does, and it should be more widely accepted in the hobby. And I disagree. They're just two different genres. And so while one may be sort of like accepted, I don't think that necessarily means we have to accept that in the hobby. I'm sure you've heard that argument before, kind of, what, I get that all the time. How do what's your response when someone maybe brings that up to you as someone in the grading space itself?
Yeah. I mean, forever it's been trading cards that's not allowed, in coins, you can dip a coin, you can, in comic books, you can restore, in art, you can restore, in cars, you can restore, for whatever reason, our collectible that's just the way it's always been. I will say that we don't, NBA, we're not guessing, and there's a lot of cards that have been stored in screw downs forever. Grading services frown on that now because it, leaves a shininess to the top of the card, and they are saying it's altered. And, I think maybe that's kind of kicked the can a little too far, in my opinion, because ultimately, if a card has been altered or its stock has been pressed and it affects the thickness of the card, so you have a nice thick edge and then it gets really narrow in its thickness towards the corner to improve the corner, that's altered, no doubt. Okay. But I can't throw a dart and see a card that I see it before and after, and everything, measures out. The stock is professionally to, or the mics are professional to the factory or origination of that. So it's like that if you take your finger and lick a corner right out of a pack, some people will call that altering a card. If the grader can't pick it off, it's not, or in our opinion, it's not. So coloring, not going to happen. Removal of color, and then it can be graded because the color's not there anymore, and it gets downgraded based on what the card looks like. Trimming, no. If you can see a trimmed edge, even if it measures, and you can be consistent to that, you got to call it. The pressing part is always kind of a wobbler because if it's done right, it's like fingerprint wiping. If people think that that's no good, well, how can you tell? You have to go on what you can see, not what people think they know or what it looked like before. I can tell you that no grader wants to put their name on something or have it go into a holder unless it meets the standards for what you've done and how you do it for the service. So that's it in a bag of tricks. So I know sometimes you'll see cards that, I've seen on message boards over the years of before and after, and it's like, wow, that's, really good. And they'll call it, but like then you see it in person, you're like, what? God, like, I don't know if I would have caught that, so completely transparent. I'd love to say I'm a super grader and I see everything, excuse me. And I sure try to. Some things are just, you can't, and you just have to be consistent to whatever you're saying. That's why I said earlier, we grade what we see, not what we think, because what we think is going to be, the line's going to be all over the place. And it's when you're going to have a lot of inconsistencies. So just keep up the guardrails, do your best, stick to the standard, and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. And, it's crazy, right? What some of these folks are like developing new techniques to try to fool you guys, right?
That's
and you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's never going away. And with the new technologies that come out every year, it's just it keeps you on your toes, I'm sure.
Yep.
And makes your job a little more difficult than it has to be sometimes, I'm sure. Yep. Well, Mike, I appreciate you making some time. I know you're a busy guy, traveling, being at the front of that table at the shows and other things. I appreciate you making some time. I always give the guests kind of the final word. Social medias, what's coming, anything you want to plug, website, take your time, get all that information out there for the listeners.
Sure. Thank you. Basically, our website is grading.mba. Our Instagram is grading.mba, trying to keep things consistent and easy. We do a lot of announcements of our show travel and whatnot on both the website and the Instagram channel in particular. We're trying to get more social with Twitter or X and YouTube and whatnot. We're a small company. We're growing. We just had our first job fair here at the Front Row Portland show. We're going to have another one in the Tacoma show next month. We're hiring big time right now, just like everybody is. The market's so big, and if you're not hiring right now, something's wrong. So I can say that. We have our new holder that's going to be coming up at the National, hopefully, for tall boys and for T3s and 5x7 star, all that good stuff. So we're excited about that. We've got some great strategic partnerships we're going to announce going into the National. We've got some great card sales for MBA graded that we're going to pump, that have gone we've been kind of keeping off grid right now, and they're going to be announced by both the buyer and the seller in terms of what's been sold. So I think some of those will be kind of eyebrow raising, great positive news. And we're looking forward to just keep growing the brand, keep going to shows, keep spreading the word, letting people know how we do what we do, how we do it, so we can kind of clear up some of the perceptions about grading the graders or whatever it is, and just sticking with the facts relative to the business case and why it's needed. And just, and be us. I'm going to be me and enjoy the hobby. Ultimately, the hobby is supposed to be enjoyed. The money's gotten so big. We throw terms around like 10K and 20K like it's $5. So, it's a weird market right now, but it's one market that no one's ever seen before happen. And like you, I hope it goes for as long as it can. So,
yeah, no doubt. Well said. Again, I appreciate you, taking some time out of your busy schedule and giving us a little bit here for the podcast. So, Mike, continued success and growth and all the good things that come along with that.
Thank you, John.